Hello, my name is Laurie Robb, and welcome to the library workshops. Today we're going to talk about plagiarism and integrating sources. In the workshop, we're going to talk about plagiarism and how it can show up in many different ways, common knowledge, strategies to integrate sources, mistakes, and tips to avoid them, and very briefly talk about the two citation styles we use at RCCC. So what is plagiarism? It's using someone's words and passing them off as your own. It can be intentional, however, I believe most students at our school do it accidentally by not allowing themselves enough time to work on their papers or to fine-tune it or to go back and add citations or correct references. So here's some tips to avoid that whole problem. First of all, plan your paper and allow yourself time. Planning your paper will help you to focus on the purpose of your paper and the points you're trying to make, and will make it less likely that you're going to want to copy and paste a lot of information from other sources because you already have your own purpose and your own voice. Choosing credible sources will really help you, especially with your citations and references. Keeping up with those sources is really useful. I can't tell you how many times I've had to search and then search again for the same sources for myself. Taking good notes is super important to make sure you can match the information back to the source it came from. Reading in chunks is really useful because when you read sentence by sentence and try to change words, it lends itself more easily to copying and using the same words, which then leads to plagiarism. So if you can read a chunk of information and then turn away from the source and then write down or type out what you've learned or remember from what you just read, that will really help you prevent yourself from copying verbatim what you've just read. Use an in-text citations when you plan. So even if you don't want to go find the exact APA or MLA in-text citation style as you're writing or planning your paper, you can at least put a placeholder to make a note to yourself for later, saying, hey, put an in-text citation here, this is important. And no matter what you think, it's not okay to copy. It's so easy now with technology for your teachers to find what you have plagiarized. So even if you think your teacher doesn't care, they do care, and the school cares. So you don't want to get caught in the safe assign web where your paper shows up as plagiarized. And when in doubt, cite your source. If you have questions and you have time, you use the tutoring center. The tutoring center is a great resource to help you see maybe what you should have cited, maybe what you didn't need to cite. We're going to talk a little bit more about common knowledge and what needs to be cited. Okay, so plagiarism, accidental, intentional, different ways to do it. Here's our top 10. So turning in someone else's work, paying for a research paper is definitely plagiarism, very intentional and very bad. Copying and pasting a significant portion of a text without changing anything. You know, even if you put quotes around it and cite it, but the paper is a lot of someone else's voice and not your own, that is still considered plagiarism, and it's not writing a very good paper. So that is down in here as well when you properly cite, but have no original work. Both of those are considered plagiarism. Going through, finding and replacing words is not enough of a change, still plagiarism. And this, I just accidentally clicked into this plagiarism spectrum, which gives you a ton of information about all these. Going back. Mixing up things, still plagiarism because it's still not your words. Recycling from previous papers is bad. Even combining cited sources with not cited sources. So let's just test ourselves here really quickly. So which of the following are considered plagiarism? So as we said, even if you cite it, but you have very little of your original voice, it's plagiarism. Changing one word for another is very much plagiarism. Here's a good one, adding a source to the reference list that doesn't exist. And I have seen this happen, and it seems like so much work to make up your own source, and it's definitely plagiarism. And taking copied pieces of source and just mashing them all together, still does not give credit back to the original owner of the idea, so that is still plagiarism. So, since we've talked a little bit about what plagiarism is, you may wonder what information has to be cited and what doesn't. So we have this thing called common knowledge, and things that are common knowledge do not have to be cited or referenced at the end. So when I mention citations, I mean your in-text citations. When I mention references, I mean the references at the end of your paper. So information that's common, things that we all know as North Carolinians, as we all know as folks who've had basic science classes, these are not referenced items, okay? And really you have to think about your audience. So if you are in a different country, then these things may not be common knowledge to that audience. But here it is common knowledge, so no references. And as you progress through your classes, when you're in a 400 level science class one day, you may not have to reference the same information that you do now, because your audience will have a greater knowledge in certain subjects. But as for now, just think about what your audience knows, and if you think they know it without looking it up, then you do not need to reference that information. You know, some things are cultural. We would know this, and maybe in a different country, they wouldn't be familiar with George Washington as a founding father, and that would need to be referenced. So what is not common knowledge? Definitely direct quotes and statistics. Those are things that we generally cannot know without looking them up, or at least not get it 100% correct. We might get close, but we can't get it 100% correct. So these things need to be cited and referenced. If you are referring to things in studies, as many of you have to do for your classes, then you have to reference that. Specific dates, numbers, information, all needs to be referenced and cited. So if you've been through English 111, this may be familiar to you. If you're looking at job outlooks and you have specific numbers, these are not things you know off the top of your head, have to be referenced. These numbers here need to be referenced. This information about pine cones, did not know that. And here I've included the author of this information in my text. So all I have to do is put the date for my APA citation. All these are an APA, by the way. Okay, so now that we know what needs to be referenced and what plagiarism is, let's talk about how to work your sources into your paper. So there's three main techniques that we use: direct quotes, paraphrasing, and summarizing. So direct quotes is what it says. That's taking someone else's information and popping it into the paper, putting quotes around it, citing it, and referencing it. Paraphrasing and summarizing are taking a larger piece of information and either condensing it into your own words for summarizing, or rephrasing it for paraphrasing it, putting it in your own words there as well. So for all three of these techniques, you do need to signal, cite, and comment. And here we're going to focus mostly on the citing part. Signaling is letting your reader know that you're talking about something else, and it can be in the sentence, or it can be at the end in your citation. Citing is what it says, including an in-text citation and referencing it at the end. And commenting is kind of a writing part of what you learn as a writer, is that you can't just pop out information without telling how it is contributing to the purpose of your paper. Okay, so of the three of these, I believe that students like using direct quotes the most. And direct quotes can be super powerful. They can be sparkly and shiny and really nail what you're trying to let your reader know. However, direct quotes should be used the least amount of these three techniques. Why? Because if you put too many direct quotes in your paper, it no longer is your paper, and you're just quoting someone else's paper. And so your reader may decide to say, hey, let me just go read the original source. I don't need to read this paper because everything's quoted. The other thing is, if you use a lot of direct quotes, your reader may think you don't understand what's being said. So Being able to paraphrase and summarize shows that you can analyze and synthesize the information that you are reading about and put it into your own words and also support the point you're trying to make. So the guidelines for direct quotes, to me, more than one per paragraph might be pushing it. And when you're using direct quotes, sometimes you don't even need like a big chunk of direct quote. You might just need to pull out the important parts of it and put that in direct quotes. So most commonly, I suggest that students try to put as much as they can in their own words, leave the direct quotes to a minimal, and use them only when needed. If I'm writing about rose bushes, I probably never need to use a direct quote. If I'm writing about Martin Luther King Jr., I probably need more direct quotes. And another place that use a lot of direct quotes is for literary or speech analysis. So if you are analyzing something, you do need to use more direct quotes because you are referring to a text, and you probably have to show your reader the text so you can talk about what the text means. You can do your analysis. Okay, so that leaves us with paraphrasing and summarizing, which are our foundations. So when you read an entire article about artificial intelligence and you boil that article down into 2 or 3 sentences, you have summarized. If you read a couple of sentences about an airline pilot and you take those 2 sentences and you put them back into your own words, you have paraphrased. So these are the same concept, but summarizing is boiling something down that's large into small, and paraphrasing is just rewording, put it in your context to support your point. And you always for all 3 techniques, I can't stress it enough, you have to in-text cite them and reference them. Okay, and this counts just like using a source for direct quotes. If your teacher says you need 3 sources, then you can use those sources as direct quotes, paraphrases, or summaries. Alrighty, so let's look a little more at that. Signal words, we were talking about signaling to your reader that you're using someone else's sources. These signal words kind of help you spice your writing up. I put this here, students like these words. It really helps you convey maybe the meaning of what you're reading to your reader better if you don't say he says, she says, it says, such and such. So these are signal words that you can use. And I also want to point out everything I'm talking about, I may be using the word papers, but these are all applicable to speeches as well. So this little box talks about integrating your sources into speeches. Oops, sorry about that. My mouse is sticky. Sorry about that. So there we go. We have your verbal citations. Plagiarism also applies to speeches. It applies to any work you do and turn in as you're on. So good information if you're in speech class. Okay, so let's look at a couple of examples. Here you go. You have case 1. You read this little sentence about Emily Howell, and then you rewrite the sentence in your own words, hopefully. So here I see that I have included an MLA in-text citation. I know it's MLA because MLA is author page number. APA is author date. So here we go. I've noticed immediately that my sentence structure is the same. I'm starting out with this little phrase with a comma. I'm just moving words around basically. I see even the words are falling in the same places. So this would be considered plagiarism. I have not changed it enough. And this is a danger if you take one sentence and try to rewrite it into another, which goes back to the point of reading in chunks instead of one sentence at a time. So let's look at case 2 and see if I did any better. So I'm reading about oil. Here's what I've read, 2 sentences. And here is what I have written. And it's in 1 sentence. And here I've even given credit to the authors in the sentence. This is called a narrative citation. I have put part of the information here in the sentence, and I've put the page number at the end. So did I do a better job? Yes, I did. So here, my point is conserving oil. here I'm reading about international travel, but this is talking about airlines conserving oil. So yes, I have done the better job. I have not plagiarized on that one. And I've also given credit back to the source. Even when you read a source within a source, you have to give proper citation. So this is happening a lot these days. People are using their textbooks or scholarly journals, and they're referring to information they're reading in the textbook or the scholarly journal. Well, when you do that, you have to cite it within your text, that you have read the study, but you didn't read it in its original form. You've read information about the study, actually, not the entire study, and you read it in this book. Okay, and this is APA citation style. So whenever you read something not firsthand, but secondhand, you give credit to the original author as well as to the source where you read it. So it gets a little trickier. It takes a little practice, but just make sure you understand that you're giving credit to the original source and where you've read it. And in the reference list, you would only include the place where you read it, not the original source, because you didn't read the original source. Now that does take it up a notch, doesn't it? All right, so here's some thing that I really hope you take from this workshop, is that references and in-text citations go together like peas and carrots. If you have a reference at the end of your paper, you have to have an in-text citation somewhere within that paper that points to the reference. If you have an in-text citation, then you have to have a reference at the end, so they point to each other. You can't have one without the other. So your in-text citation also should be easily connected to the reference at the end. And this is where format and citation style becomes important. This is why there is an MLA and an APA and some of the other citation styles, because you want to be able to very easily point your reader to where you got your information. So here, this is MLA again. So here's my author's name, and when I look in the reference list, there's my author's name. I can very easily know this information came from this source on this page number, and this is how I can go find the complete source. So you cannot have one without the other, peas and carrots. And having said that, when I look at source synthesis, if I'm supposed to use 3 sources, and I've highlighted my sources, I've highlighted the information to make it easy to find. These are my 3 sources. Only one of these can be correct. Obviously, it's the first one, because there we have referenced each of the 3 sources with in-text citations. It doesn't matter if you use a giant chunk from one source, but you don't use the other 2, it's still wrong. Or even if you use a tiny little chunk from one source, but you don't use the other 2. You can't have all 3 unless you've referenced them in your text. Okay? So hopefully that makes more sense to you about integrating sources, how to do it properly, what plagiarism is, tips to avoid plagiarism. Mostly your planning and your writing will help you avoid plagiarism. If you have any more questions about plagiarism, you can always ask, or about integrating sources or finding sources or citations. You can always use the little chat button that you see around on our web pages. Here it is. You can also email any of the librarians. We'll be glad to help you. Here's our email addresses. And if in your Blackboard classes, you can look at academic support over on the left column and click on library, and it will take you to a custom-made page that fits that topic, that class. So when you are in Blackboard and you have questions about APA style or MLA style, you have a page set up very much like this one that's attached to all of your courses. And here we've made put a lot of information about citation styles. So if you have questions about those tricky web pages and how to cite an APA style, there's information to help you. You can click on all these and it'll give you an example, give you some information. There's also templates to help you write in APA and MLA style. So please make use of your research guides, ask for help. We are here for you. And thanks for coming, and have a great day.